Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, is truly an action stealth game. And stealth is only one possible approach to its gameplay. The objective of the game is to beat each mission with the highest score possible, the scoring system marking a major difference from Ground Zeroes, the previous game in the Metal Gear Solid 5 series. In Ground Zeroes, you were penalized for each kill and each alert. In the Phantom Pain, there is only a flat bonus for no retries, no kills, no reflex, no alerts, and perfect stealth. You also get bonuses for takedowns, headshots, neutralizations, and enemies marked. The greatest point bonus in Metal Gear Solid 5 comes from time. In this sense, the Phantom Pain recalls its spiritual predecessor, Peace Walker, with its lightning-fast portable design. But Phantom Pain decelerates purposefully, introducing an adaptive difficulty as well as a day-night system, which give the game a measure of randomness. This unpredictability, which I've actually spoken about before in my appraisal of Peace Walker, brings back the observation element that designers had in every game prior, without disrupting the overall consistency of the game. By changing the scoring system, the Phantom Pain opens the game up to loud combat approaches, and perhaps even incentivizes them in some manner, by providing only flat bonuses for uses of stealth, but point bonuses per neutralization. It is difficult to understate how much of a revolution Phantom Pain is in the idea of Metal Gear, more so than even Metal Gear Solid 1. This is not merely a change in perspective and control and meta systems, but in genre. The Phantom Pain, as I said, is not a stealth game, or a stealth action game, as Peace Walker is arguably, but, as I said, action stealth, where action, being loud, so to speak, is completely acceptable, and perhaps even the expected approach in many cases. You can ride in, guns blazing, on a helicopter and not even exit the gunner seat, yet accomplish your mission with an S rank. You can mow down hundreds of people, and the only reason you'll get a B is because you took too long in the mission. I must say, the way that the engine and control system blends action into what is now Metal Gear is actually quite seamless. All the traits of Metal Gear are present. They have been transformed rather than removed, though whether this form is better or worse than the others is something to be concluded at the end of this review rather than the beginning. In this transformation, the mother-based system finally is employed according to function, as the facilitator of true action stealth gameplay, rather than an arsenal of action game items being added to a stealth game. The gear is awesome, and you actually get to use it. Grenade launchers, stun shotguns, big-ass sniper rifles, machine guns, long-range revolvers, rocket punches, it's all here, except elites. No dual pistols of any kind for some reason. The problem remains there are still too many guns. I understand that the bionic arm has many different types, since there's only one slot, and it's the only weapon of its kind. But having 10 different kinds of every other type of weapon, and in addition having so few non-lethal options among these kinds, makes no sense. It does make slightly more sense than the same situation in Peace Walker, since Phantom Pain accommodates lethal and non-stealth options in its scoring system, but then it begs the question why it is just as neglectful of peaceful options in a game where non-lethal and lethal are equally legitimate approaches according to the scoring system. If anything, the Phantom Pain is more bloated than Peace Walker, given the sheer amount of gear you can equip at the same time. Peace Walker had 16 slots total, 8 for weapons, 8 for items, and you didn't even get to use them all the time due to the outfit or camo system in that game, providing only a certain amount of available slots given whatever type of camo you selected. In Phantom Pain, there are 23 slots. You get your iDroid, InScope, Fulton, 8 possible items, 8 possible support weapons, 2 secondary weapons, and 2 primary weapons. Granted, you obviously don't use them all in every mission in either game, but it's ridiculous that you can carry that much when not only do you not need that much, even in the most demanding missions, but you are punished for taking that much, despite the fact that Phantom Pain does not restrict gear slots in the same way Peace Walker does. Speaking of punishment, meta progression also returns and is much more invasive than before. Even worse, the game introduces resource management. Fuck you. Stealth games, action games do not need incessant resource management. I will accept the use of gross military product in a manner similar to, say, Armored Core. Armored Core has a perfectly reasonable player finance system. Sure, it does become almost completely pointless on a New Game Plus, but it at least is holistic in the sense that it makes your upgrades and playstyle a function of your customization and your ability to perform in-game. So, gross military product is not inherently bad. It is tied to Mother Base in a way that partially removes it from your gameplay, but it is for the most part a result of your actions in gameplay. But the plants? Are you kidding? I have to pick flowers? This is not even consistent with the verisimilitude of Metal Gear, much less the concept of stealth action, especially not the action-oriented stealth seen in the Phantom Pain. Silencers, ammo, grenades, munition in general, these could all hypothetically be bought, and if other more exotic items like the combat drugs need to be manufactured, why would you need to pay for them twice? The second time being deployment, because you already manufactured them. Furthermore, why are all these not purchasable on some kind of black market? You're telling me that Venom Snake, who everyone says is a demon, regardless of how many hero points you have, I might add, doesn't have some kind of black market drug connection? This whole plant metal resource system is bullshit. Most of all because, given the proper amount of grinding, you can get enough to deploy on every mission multiple times. The challenge here isn't management of resources, given you can just grind them out, but patience, given the fact that we are once again confronted with grinding as in Peace Walker. But unlike Peace Walker, the grinding is always there. The grinding also doesn't make the broken parts of the game, like the parasite capsules, not broken. They are still broken. It's just a greater time investment outside of gameplay to deploy them. There's no change to the gameplay, only a non-gameplay barrier in between, called grinding. Even worse is you can accelerate the construction, development, and deployment of almost anything in the game with real-life money. Fuck that. Suppose you were to grind enough to play the entire campaign 50 times over with the most resource-expensive loadout. What is the difference between this and the mod I installed, besides the tolerance for wasting time? Since I have bypassed all this grind, I am divulging my mod list here for the sake of integrity. But let's be honest, If I really had to put up with this bullshit without being able to skip it, I would have skipped Metal Gear Solid 5, because I'm not putting up with that. Ever. Continuing with the topic of mother-based systems, the buddy system sucks. The core problem with the buddy system is that it's trying to replace the co-op from Peace Walker, but simultaneously is the only way to provide a reasonable mode of fast traversal to the player. So, in terms of gameplay possibilities, you're stuck between a damning choice and a completely negligible loss. Either you give up your quickest movement option, which many missions will absolutely require for an S rank, or you give up a moderately useful ally. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm picking the latter every single time. I will always sacrifice fire support or detection systems, which I can make up for in my own loadout, for speed in a game where speed is the greatest point bonus. Not only this, but the choice between horse and walker is much more significant than quiet and dog. Horse is stealth traversal, and walker is the fastest non-vehicular traversal in the game, as far as I know. However, on walker, you can't use your own gear. It has its own set of items which don't scale as much as yours. On D-Horse, you get to use your own guns and have options for stealth. But D-Horse simply doesn't get around as fast or traverse as well as D-Walker. So the buddy system is a complete bust. They screwed it up by slotting Quiet and D-Dog into it. Furthermore, Quiet and D-Dog themselves aren't really that good. They're quite mediocre, and it's surprising that you have to max out your in-game bond with Quiet to get the final missions in the game. The camo system in this game is almost entirely irrelevant, in one part because enemies are now oblivious idiots and couldn't see you if you were wearing a traffic cone or hear you if you were running in clown shoes. But in the other part because the benefits of non-camo outfits are just too good to ignore. The devs also knew how good these outfits would become, and some of them restrict you to an A rank maximum if you use them at the highest upgrade level. It's a stupid decision, since the easiest way to balance them would have been to link your total gear slots to specific outfits, as in Peace Walker. Also, where's the let's rock, or stealth, or survival lines from Peace Walker? They were sick, and it'd have been easy to put them in, but I'm not really concerned with that in the greater perspective of the game. I just think it'd be cool to hear Sutherland say those lines. In the way that the camo system has some that are just way too good due to their bonuses, night vision is easily one of the best items in the game. At max upgrade level, its battery lasts basically forever, and it detects virtually every important element of the level in bright neon lime without necessitating any use of the int scope. In fact, it almost entirely invalidates the use of the int scope, except for identifying mission-critical personnel. In addition, it's night vision, so it works all the time for some reason, even though night vision shouldn't be that good in the day. I've played entire levels with this over my eyes, and you don't need to take it off for any reason besides popping another mist capsule. Speaking of which, parasite capsules! They're so good. So good. Way too good. The mist capsule is de facto the same as having stealth camo, except you can still get S ranks with it. I haven't used the armor capsule much, to be honest, but it seems like it'd be pretty good. The easiest non-lethal loadout is, as far as I can tell, Parasite Mist, Jehudi's Hand, and some kind of stun grenade deployment system. I use the launcher pistol. My question in regards to the Parasite capsules, Where is the speed capsule? The Skull Soldiers can move incredibly fast. They leap across the theater of war and can easily outpace D-Walker. Quiet herself can move insanely fast too when she needs to. Why skip the most obvious choice for third capsule when MGS5 has the biggest levels in the entire franchise? Parasite's stealth deprives you of an S rank, but stealth camo is still in the game while also doing that. It would have just been better to add an actually usable and useful capsule, like speed, one which actually fits the Skull Soldier's abilities. Now, usable is a debatable term. The Parasite gear costs a ton of money, but once you get to the endgame of Mother Base, you'll be rolling in cash. I'm pretty sure if you beat missions well enough, it literally just refunds itself, and doubly so in some cases. Just as many items can be adapted to by the adaptive difficulty as items that can't be. For instance, I started using sleep grenades a lot. Within a few missions, enemies started putting on gas masks. Then I switched to tranquilizers, and enemies started wearing helmets. But now, fewer were wearing gas masks. First of all, they should be wearing both, because the difficulty adapting in this way only creates a carousel effect in gear choice, rather than enforcing legitimately thought out selections. Second of all, enemies can't adapt to much outside of this. For lethal options, they obviously will start wearing armor, but depending on how violent your approach is, only a few out of a group of troops stationed in any given place will be properly decked out to face you when you're being as lethal as possible. From this, when your merry-go-round of gear does 3/4 of a revolution, you land on stunner items. Did Kojima Productions just forget that they put these in the game? The ideal non-lethal loadout basically boils down to just Hand of Jehudi and maybe one long-range non-lethal, but you could play the entire game outside of heavy armor missions and boss fights with this stupid-ass item. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Zone of the Enders 2, and this item does go hard, but the reason I call it stupid is because it goes so hard that it gets stupid. It is almost completely silent. In fact, I think launching it is completely silent. It is medium range, non-lethal, with potential lock-on that can't be defended against by any element of the adaptive difficulty system. The only defenses are being in a vehicle, although if I recall correctly, not every vehicle is safe, being behind a full obstruction, since Jehudi's hand can grab across micro-terrain, or being out of range, all of which can easily be solved by the player. Just route around them. The Bionic Arm in general has an insane amount of good modes, and as I see it, Jehudi's hand takes the cake, because on top of all that, the firing mechanism is separate from your grab. So it doesn't pull them and automatically lock you into a CQC hold, such that if you release the enemy, they scream and alert their allies. It pulls them right in front of you and stuns them for a few seconds. So you can fire multiple times and group up numerous enemies around you silently before knocking them out. This is important because even if you were locked into a CQC takedown instead of just a hold, by depriving you of options and exposing you for a small time span, it still would have been less broken than it is. So Jehudi and stun items cannot be adapted against at all, really. They just pwn everything. There's no gear enemies can get that will adapt them to these approaches, meaning that the adaptive difficulty itself isn't really a difficulty system since it has this giant loophole in its structure. In concept, it's a good solution to the massive arsenal of Mother Base, but they messed up in the implementation. Another problem the Phantom Pain has is that you can't replay important side ops unless you reload a save or delete your save. And on top of that, there's no cutscene theater. So if you don't use a mod menu like I did to load these up, they're basically gone forever. I don't really care about the quiet cutscenes since I don't care about the character that much, but it is a little silly that these are locked behind random mother base events and then you never get to see them again. For instance, I had already released Quiet from service in Diamond Dogs when I got this helicopter cutscene. Why is a game so focused on meta progression so lacking in the element of replayability? Even on a lot of the replay missions, you don't get the cutscenes. A core element of the game, the mission structure, lacks a critical element of replayability, meaning you can't get the full experience on the second time around. You might question why I, of all people, would complain that a game is missing cutscenes, especially Metal Gear, with its incessant, annoying, really not great cutscenes a lot of the time. And this Metal Gear, out of all Metal Gears, with its horribly long, drawn-out, poorly edited cutscenes, but I accuse it of error because it forces the user, if he wishes to replay the game in full, to get the full experience one more time, to reset his entire save file. But if you reset your save file, then of course you can't use any of your mother base gear, in which case you aren't actually replaying the game, are you? Peace Walker's error was similar but singular, having locked the end game playthroughs behind meta progression. But here, the error is twofold. Not only is this meta progression a barrier of grind between the player and the full experience of the game, but the full experience of the game will eventually become lost to you forever the longer you play it. There is no winning. Ground Zeroes remedied this by placing every cutscene within their respective missions, locking progression to each individual mission. But if we go back even further in the series, guess what? 3 doesn't do any of this. When you load up the game for the first time, and the substance time, and the subsistence time, and every time afterwards, it's the same game. The only difference is the Patriot and your camos, but there is no difference between the second playthrough and any playthrough after in terms of the holistic experience of the game. Not so for Phantom Pain, and again, Kojima solves a solution with a problem. Speaking of solving a solution with a problem, Ground Zeroes was the solution to the release of Phantom Pain. You would think, well, of course, we know that, it's a demo, but this kind of partitioned release was just the kind of thing needed if he wanted to get his full game out. The incompleteness of the Phantom Pain is apparent to anyone who has played it. All the characteristic flair of Metal Gear isn't present in the design. The post-production, so to speak, isn't really present. The battle gear is presented, but never used. Part 2 of the game is almost entirely reused missions. So few of the missions have cutscenes, and most of the missions themselves seem like busy work for the player, with a lack of any distinguishing sequence arising from their arrangement. Ground Zeroes has none of these problems. Even if it has more bad missions and good in terms of number, even if its good missions aren't that great, each mission at least has an identity in its objective that differentiates it from the other missions in the game. Jamais-Vu is different from Eliminate the Renegade Threat, despite their objectives both boiling down to, go get these guys. If Kojima made the executive decision to release the Phantom Pain as a series of games in acts, or expansion packs, even standalone expansions, he could have made them far more complete and cut down on the filler, the foam packaging levels that surround the core missions of the game. Because he didn't, now, instead of the amazing extra ops of Peace Walker and the pretty good extra ops of Ground Zeroes, we get endless mind-numbing side ops that are literally designed to be single-play missions. The adaptive difficulty loopholes, and the lack of identity in most of the missions could have easily been resolved if he had just created a single polished release, maybe a mean between the scale of Ground Zeroes and Peace Walker for just the first act, and then repeated this for the second and speculated third act. I've heard speculation that there were supposed to be 5 acts, but man, if he just took the Ground Zeroes approach, reasonably expanded, of course, for all of this, I would have accepted 10 standalone releases. I wouldn't care. It's equally respectable and pathetic that Kojima as a director wanted to make something big rather than surrendering a complete work per section of his vision. Really, though, the biggest loss is extra ops. Peace Walker and Ground Zeroes are, in a sense, completed by the inclusion of those, and Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is sorely lacking that higher level of challenge and identity which Peace Walker rose to. Granted, the path to all items and meta progression and all that is arguably much less obtuse than Peace Walker's dinosaur Monster Island stuff. Let's get to level analysis. Before we analyze the missions themselves, we have to analyze the open world. What exactly is the function of an open world from a gameplay perspective? I don't actually know. If it's to give levels a consistent identity, you could just design individual levels that way. If it's to make levels more open, again, you can just design the level in question that way. What does an open world offer that regular levels can't? Especially when the open world is its own quasi-level that you're not forced to exist in during the in-between. Having considered the perspectives of my trusted allies, I would argue that the largest error is in the incongruence. If the world is open, you shouldn't be able to just leave it anytime you want. If they wanted true guerrilla gameplay, you'd be forced to stay in the open world for a number of missions or a certain number of days, and Pequod would only extract you afterwards. This would give greater significance to item choice and another reason to use the Phantom Cigar, as well as changing arsenals on the fly, a ton of other iDroid features that just aren't used throughout most of the game, while still being in line with the verisimilitude theme of Metal Gear's gameplay. The open world as it is just presents a pointless, underutilized addition to the game. If you make an open world, you have to have a purpose to be in that world, other than levels or missions. Furthermore, traversal of that world has to be well designed. It must be part of gameplay. The first level. It's hard to even call this a level, assuming you don't skip the cutscenes, and as an appraiser, I'm not. You've got over half an hour of cutscene footage and holding forward tutorial gameplay before Vic hands you a gun, after which you have roughly a minute and 30 seconds of freedom to play the game before you're locked back into 10 more minutes of cutscenes with about 30 seconds worth of holding forward to run towards the hospital exit. This is by far one of the worst levels in all of the Metal Gear that I've played. At least the Man on Fire segment at the end features some semblance of actual game design. You shoot him when he's about to attack. Very simple, but the brevity of this chase sequence makes it more tolerable. The Earth makes a full rotation by the time the post-score screen cinematics finish. This level sucked. Venom makes it to Afghanistan, and his objective in this next mission is to retrieve Miller. Before we get to any other mission, a lot of objective design in the Phantom Pain is some form of go get this guy. It's very disappointing replaying this game since you start remembering how little identity each of these missions have. Other thing that makes the game infuriating to replay is the fact that so many missions have you start on the other side of the planet and gallop all the way over from your spawn point to Miller's location. There is one outpost which is easily bypassed in between the default spawn and the objective. The only time you stop galloping is when you pass this outpost, though judging by the fact that the enemies are idiots in this game, you could probably just take a short detour and cross the whole trail at a gallop. There is no point to spawning this far away normally, since there's no difficulty or purpose to the traversal required between you and the objective. Sure, I probably should have blown up the radar so I could land, but I hadn't remembered that mechanic at this point in my replay. Regardless, I S-ranked this on my first time on my first playthrough. Not first try though, obviously. It is stupendously easy, even without Parasite Mist, as the hillside village has a ton of visually isolated angles. So approach from the right side, take out or pass a few guys, and then Miller will be inside unprotected. Though one of these guys is inside the building sometimes, so you have to be more careful with him. Sneaking by the Skull Soldiers is hard since they run on Ground Zero's AI, and I've never actually successfully passed them without getting detected. But it's also not required for you to do it, so I've never put serious effort into trying, besides the first time when I didn't know it wasn't required. Regardless, here's my score on Parasite Gear. Fun mission in concept, since it's always better to be forced to do a helicopter extraction on human targets than being allowed to just wormhole them to Mother Base on the spot with no difficulty. The execution problems are that it's just too easy, and there's way too much pointless traversal unless you take out the anti-air radar. But that's not going to happen if you're playing the mission for the first time. By the way, I'm skipping mission 2 since it's just another tutorial. Fuck that. Same with the FOB tutorial. I mean, obviously they wanted FOBs to be their big way, into microtransactions, and I'm not going to put up with that shit. Not to say I don't like FOBs, but, I mean, just tutorializing your campaign. Come the fuck on, dude. Don't do that. The mission afterwards is another go get this guy mission. It's not necessary to extract him, but extraction isn't an increase in difficulty, since only a very small selection of targets need to be extracted without wormholes. It's another long distance approach as well, this time with nobody in between you and the objective. Why does it have to be like this unless you're taking out the radar dishes? All it does is punish the first time player by wasting his time, and it punishes them for no reason. Are you expected to drop into open world Afghanistan after mission 1 and blow up every single radar on the map? The first time player won't even know about this mechanic. I certainly didn't until I looked up an S rank for one specific mission, which we're about to cover. Regardless, you go get the guy, and in my case, I decided to extract him. I'm not a fan of assassinating people since it's inconsistent with Kojima's position on silent killing for, I don't know, at least 15 years before the release of Metal Gear Solid 5. You could hypothetically call a helicopter the moment you get in, gallop over, and wait to snipe him, but considering he spawns inside the building, I hypothesize it's just as fast to drop a mist capsule, run in, clock him, extract him, and leave. I tried this one time with normal gear, and I did screw up a lot, but I somehow came out with an S rank. The sheer amount of points you get for just doing a mission in a short amount of time is way, way, way too high. Next mission, blow shit up. This is where you truly see the difference that drop points make in a mission. If you do this mission normally, it takes around maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your loadout. But if you do it with parasite gear, it'll probably take 3 to 4, and 90% of that will be riding over to the objective. Now, if you blow up the radar dish and ride in guns blazing, this can be done in under 2 minutes. You fly in, blast them all with a door gun, and then Pequod automatically takes you home since the objectives are already complete. He doesn't even attempt to land. Additionally, Pequod himself doesn't technically trigger any combat alerts. Only Venom can. So you can go absolutely buck wild with Mayhem from your chopper and still get codename Foxhound at the end of the mission, just as long as you don't get too close. Why is this mission even in the game? Why was the last mission in the game? Why are these main ops if they're in the game at all? These two barely qualify as extra ops. Go Get This Guy 3 is a little more elaborate since you're infiltrating a proper enemy base. I decided to switch it up a bit and go in as Raiden. Still non-lethal, of course, because I just choose to play like that generally. Sometimes I don't, but I prefer it. It's a nice change of pace to challenge yourself by not using parasite gear, but I'm not about to pretend that's any merit to the game. Your infill spot this time is a little more reasonable since there is an obstacle on the way to the objective. What? That's right, fellas. There's a whole 2 mines on top of the hill. You slick bastard, Kojima. You did it again. You freaking genius. You can just run around them. Your path up the hill is really easy, and it came back to me almost through muscle memory. Across the road, around the rocks, up towards the lights. This time I took an alternate path since it's a little hard to sneak through the large entrance due to the light setup there. This backyard area behind the prison facility is a little empty though, to be honest. Shouldn't they have a lookout or two atop the mountain? I got caught on the way back and booked it out of the mission area. I still got an S rank somehow. Codename this time was Octopus. Finally, you get to a real mission, Where Do the Bees Sleep? Which has the most infuriating default landing out of any in the game. Only A Quiet Exit is even close to this bad, and still doesn't get close. Unless you blow up the radar and replay it, the mission is 99% boring, easy traversal on horseback or D-Walker. Changing your drop location to the base itself drops your completion time from a 30-minute average to less than 7 minutes. It's ridiculous. The meat of the mission itself involves stealthing or shooting, if you choose to, through this large open area out front, and then through the cave. Drop the mist when you're in the chopper, dash into the cave. There's one guy at the top of the stairs and another guy a little further up the way. Problem with this is, once again, stuns cannot be adapted to and have a huge radius and range when fired from any kind of launcher. I almost forgot to mention the Noctocyanin trivializes this. In fact, if you didn't have night vision goggles for whatever reason, Noctocyanin does the trick just fine. Bang a left around the second story of the temple. There are about 4 guys stationed here. All of them you can smack with Hand of Jehudi. Drop them, get back to the objective. I missed one guy, I stunned him, extracted all the already unconscious guys. Once you get outside, you're greeted by the Skull Soldiers, but as per usual, you can just run by them with 0 risk. What's the point of it all? S-ranked it, codename Octopus again. Red Brass. This mission is only as complicated as you make it, and guess what kind of objective it has? Go get these guys, because there's more than one. There are 2 jeeps driving in from opposite ends of the map. Guys are due to meet in a small one-room house in a heavily patrolled town. You'll get to see how good Jehudi is here. The stuns are also really good, and you can do it all with total stealth with the cover of the mist capsule. I got it done quicker by riding out to neutralize one group early, but I do appreciate the tight patrols inside the town since they stay close enough to each other that it's still a slight challenge to grab and neutralize them with Jehudi. Now, what isn't hard is just zapping them with a stun grenade. There's 10 plus guys in the village after the second jeep drives up too, but the whole mission still gets pwned easily by the parasite mist. Now we get to Occupation Forces, a mission that's repeated in Act 2. For these missions, I'm just going to do the more difficult Act 2 version of said mission. There's no point in doing the original, it's just filler in comparison. For this mission, all you have to do is run down here towards the far base, which causes the targets to spawn early, then post up in the brush over here, then purposefully get detected and Fulton the 3 vehicles in order of proximity. The trick is to not use the wormhole Fulton because it extracts too quick and the enemy gets right back to trucking before you can snatch him up. I remember taking an absurd amount of tries to do this on my first playthrough using wormhole Fulton, but I kept messing up. I did get it in the very end, but I didn't want to have to go through that whole ordeal more than once, so I changed it back to the old-fashioned skyhook. Still an absurdly easy mission even with the added difficulty of subsistence. After this, the first mission focused on heavy armor, Back Up, Back Down, which also has a rerun in Act 2 on Extreme. Since the difficulty is so lacking in Phantom Pain, being able to play a so-called extreme level is something I would relish if it were actually anywhere close to extreme in 3 or hard in Ground Zeroes. This mission is an utter cakewalk, as they say. If you just bring the Molotov, you can snipe every unit before they can get a good angle on you, and at insane range as well. Why are you able to silence the Molotov? Who made this decision? No weapon this powerful, enough to blow up an APC in 3 shots, and a tank in like 5, should be compatible with a silencer. Anyways, the mission starts with 3 units at opposite ends of the map, with one already in view. Snipe him, then hightail it to the fork in the road down south. After this, another few spawn, as well as jeep with a prisoner on it. Run back over the side of the mountain to take out the rocket artillery, then bump into your horse so he remembers who's boss. Get rid of the jeep real quick with a stun grenade, hit the truck as it comes round the bend, and then, this was my mistake by the way, run up to meet the rocket artilleries driving in from the other section. I unfortunately let them go around the mountain and had to waste time getting another shooting angle on them. With this strategy, I missed one, but originally, I think my strategy was to just meet them all at the edge of the map or something. This way was moderately more time consuming, but I got my S either way, so why does it matter, right? This is what I'm talking about in terms of being lenient. The S rank does not sufficiently demonstrate how well you beat the mission. The following mission includes a guy who you have to go get. On the first time around, you meet Quiet upon exiting, but the cutscene doesn't appear in the replay, regardless of whether you pick the normal or extreme version. I'll be picking the extreme difficulty because this sniper duel is arguably one of the best parts of the game, despite the fact that I still hate Quiet. This mission recalls the precision of the previous 5 entry, Ground Zeroes, but given proper challenge and depth. The premise is that it's a sniper duel where one of the snipers is caught off guard. I refuse to engage with any of the shenanigans people do with this mission and find far more satisfaction in just dueling it out. That is the place of this mission as far as I can tell. The amount of micro positioning and macro positioning going on from both sides in this level really puts it somewhere else, above every other boss fight in here, actually. My best ever score was 2 headshots, 100% accuracy, 2 minutes 38 seconds with an S rank, of course.
On this, I got roughly 4,000 less points, but it was nonetheless enjoyable. The procedure is as such. You have to use this small little peephole between the tree trunk and the brick stack to headshot Quiet with your Molotov. After this, she'll dash down to your left to one of two positions. If you're scared, you can down an Acceleramin, but you don't actually need to if you're efficient enough. If you're good enough at this, you won't need to. Doing it without one also just makes it much more exciting. The extreme version of this mission is easily top 5 out of all missions in the game. You have to utilize all the micro positioning, all the little micro terrain, using stealth and cover in your macro positioning to flank her. And since she's always technically, quote, alert to you, unquote, this level right here is without a doubt a champion of the action stealth synthesis as designed in the Phantom Pain. It's also difficult. It is a challenge to beat. If you pop your head up for even a moment, she takes it right off. In the easy mode version, she takes forever once she gets eyes on, and is, in contrast, a total dunce in terms of being able to find out where you are. She doesn't actually look for you in the easy version. The outcome of your duel is entirely dependent upon your skill as a player in utilizing the control systems, which includes movement and aim, as well as the level, to your advantage in order to win. She can also see through parasite mist. I forgot to mention that before. Just a nice little reminder that they knew how busted Mist was, but only balanced it out for this specific mission. At least they picked a good mission to balance it on. Shoot that bitch in the head, no hesitation, go home. It was a good ride, I'll say that much. After this is Hellbound, but the Quiet boss fight, the prisoner extraction before that, and Hellbound, these are all contained within a mandatory side op. Welcome to Phantom Pain, where the real pain is all the amazing design decisions they made. What exactly is the point of non-replayable side ops? Side ops also aren't scored, by the way. Did I mention that as well? They basically only exist for grinding. It's appalling. Story side ops, on the other hand, beg the question why they are side ops at all. Make Contact with Emmerich actually forces you to infiltrate the base that Hellbound starts in, rather than spawning inside it on the replay. Why is base infiltration non-replayable in Metal Gear Solid? Hello? Either way, the problem is made worse when the base that Huey is taken out of, that you start Hellbound in, actually has better enemy distribution than the one they bring him to. The AI bunker base has all its dudes front-loaded, basically grouped up near the gate you arrived at. The main problem with Phantom Pain, as you're starting to see, is that enemies are just way too spaced out and their senses aren't any more acute to make up for it. The Sahelanthropus part is an interesting way to incorporate stealth into a boss, even though it's not even a fight, it's just an escape. The problem is the silly scripted end section. It's stupid. Take it out. It's just pointless and could have been a cutscene. Venom's next adventure takes him to the very heart of darkest Africa. This mission has a total stealth version, which is essentially European Extreme, so we'll be playing that since European Extreme is the best and only proper way to experience Metal Gear, at least up until now. You'll start off with another stupid traversal section before approaching an African mercenary camp. 2 soldiers are stationed near your entry point but are easily bypassed. On the town beach, they're teaching a group of child soldiers. Before you stun them, you'll want to take care of this patrol here. Then drop your grenade on them and extract them all. The only reason you spawn this far away is to introduce you to the child soldiers. Like, wow, child soldiers exist. I didn't know that, Kojima. That's crazy. It's basically just for shock factor. There's a guy or two on the other end of the village, but if you route a bit better than I did, I'm sure you can just avoid them entirely. A huge barren landscape to traverse, and then the real mission starts. It's an oil refinery, and the two objectives here are very well sequestered behind tons of bad guys, with plenty of visual obstructions and physical obstacles to cross. I was going to make a point about how it's ridiculous that Venom can't just mantle up onto these walls considering the kind of soldier he is, but in hindsight they actually do serve a purpose by forcing the player to confront the challenge of the level. However, they could have made them taller concrete walls to at least visually cue the player in. Still, this refinery is absolutely crawling with bad guys, and approaching the switch room can get you detected even under cover of the parasite mist. The second objective, being across from the contaminated lake and not connected by a direct path, actually just makes traversal matter, despite the act of traversal that you have to make being very trivial. Unfortunately, escaping the base is rather easy if you wait to detonate your C4, which you have to. Overall, not a bad mission besides the dead zone in the middle. After this is Lingua Franca, where you have to go get this guy. The premise of the mission is to follow this guy so you can find this other guy and then get that guy. This mission took less than 5 minutes, but the only reason it took more than a minute at all is because Phantom Pain insists on putting insane amounts of mileage into Venom's quads for no good reason at all. Devs just made the levels way too big, maybe to justify the open world, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. It's just a garbage filler level. Next up, total stealth mode on Footprints of Phantoms. Your objective is surprisingly not to go get a guy, but to get a group of walker gears, and they aren't that far away either. So the setup is already better than the other go get this guy or get these guys missions. The area around the targets is saturated with enemy patrols. These guys are in every nook and cranny of this hillside, and not just in places visible from your landing point. The saturation of enemy sense boxes in the zones of the objective are critical for making your action stealth game require stealth. Okay? The other part of developer fiat that we see here is that this version of the mission is total stealth. You can't ride in guns blazing with a grenade launcher like you can on the original level, and then mow down all the rest of the mercs with a machine gun. Why is this important? Because if a mission is easily completed with one approach, and you want to emphasize a different approach, then you score based on one approach, and determining failure states is part of scoring. Now, the mission itself isn't that complicated because you're just dropping parasite mist and cracking heads, then extracting the walker gears. But in execution, it's still a little challenging since there are so many dudes camped out here, and the zone is so small that they can actually see you through the mist on occasion. This level inadvertently solves a lot of the problems with the stealth gameplay of the Phantom Pain, and those problems were also solved in the level before last. But in addition to that, here there are no traversal problems. So overall, pretty solid. Only problem is the landing point is a little far, but not beyond reason. Following this, I did the legendary gunsmith side ops. I'm not going to wait or jump through any more hoops because I'm not a circus animal, so I force unlocked the other gunsmith side ops and cleared them, only to get an almost completely useless gun customization menu. All it's good for is putting night sights and maybe a rangefinder on your guns. Our next confrontation with the skulls is in Trader's Caravan. This mission is really short and really easy. Take D-Walker and step on the gas till you get to the far side of the airport. Distract the two dudes watching this truck, then approach and you'll get a cutscene. I recall seeing someone stealth the truck out, but it did not work for me, so I Fultoned it instead. However, you would think that getting detected by the skulls counts as a combat alert, and it doesn't. I fucked this up and still got Foxhound. Even if you're surrounded at this proximity by the Skull Soldiers, I mean, these guys are dangerous, right? You would think, okay, you instantly lose. They just kill you. They gun you down, they chop your head off, whatever, right? And this is supposedly the extreme version, right? But you can screw up and get out with just 2 hits. Now, Skull Soldiers do become threatening later, but it's only in one mission. They're chumps before this, complete chumps. Number 17, rescue the intel agents. Gee, I wonder what this mission is about. Do you think there are guys that I need to go get? Having become so sick of this roughly halfway through the game, I just decided to go in guns blazing, which in all honesty should have been a mission type alongside total stealth. The premise of 17 is that there are 2 important friendly agents who have been captured by the enemy. One is in the nearby forest and the other is in an enemy prison. The camp where that prison is located is on the edge of said forest, so the mission sort of takes place in this one large trapezoidal zone, the targets lying on each end. The problem with this mission primarily is that, as far as I can tell, the critical areas don't have enough bad guys. They give too much space to each patrol, and it's impossible for them to cover their respective area on their own, either during stealth or action. Somehow, I got an S rank after tanking 44 hits and eating up over 8 minutes of time. Next is Blood Runs Deep. This mission is split up into 2 target zones, and you can actually land in either one and complete the objectives as you please. But I'm going with taking out the commander first. My choice is a hot landing. Just taking out the whole camp with the door gun is the most efficient way to deal with this. You just have to wait for the commander to appear, or you can jump out and run into his hut and shoot him. I was gonna shoot him, but I decided maybe I'll take a chance. If you bring D-Walker, you can take out the approaching APC very easily. Up that road is a quarry base, which you would think has considerably more dudes, but it's roughly the same number, just at a lower density due to the base layout. The biggest obstacle for me here was this emplaced gun, which kept me behind cover for a solid 30 seconds. Why aren't enemies giddy enough to jump on these anytime they see a threat? Why isn't there a guy stationed on these at every base? Just having 1 or 2 more and having designated gunners at every base or encampment would instantly jump the general difficulty of the game. Call Pequod to the quarry, enter the mine, and here's the trick. Tranquilize all the mission targets and you can Fulton them out instead of escorting them. Boom, Pequod takes you home, S rank, codename Bat. After this, you have a stupid-ass trailing mission where you don't even have to trail anybody. If you just remember where they are in this little corner of the map, you can run in there, spam stun grenades, extract them all. And you could probably do it faster if you marked your target first and only extracted him, I guess. But who cares? Sub 5 time S rank, codename Shark. The problem with this mission is that the person you're supposed to trail isn't himself a target. If you remember or already know where your actual target is, the trailing part of the mission is completely discarded. This problem occurred in other MGS games as well, like with Zadornov, so clearly they needed more time to reflect on game design. Mission 20, called Voices, is a nice return to the more robust multi-stage level that we saw in Ground Zeroes. In this mission, you're forced to confront the Man on Fire as a boss. The mission is broken up into roughly 3 parts: the checkpoints, the canyon, and the Man on Fire. Now, if you haven't noticed, I'm playing this with the Black Ocelot outfit rather than Parasite gear for the sake of the cutscenes, since I played the entire game the first time around with Parasite gear, not caring about the cutscenes at all. I need footage, you know? So the first checkpoint is actually not that hard to pass, but the problem is that it's just not sufficiently guarded, and neither is the area behind it. In fact, you don't have to interact with enemies, use stealth for at least 3 minutes after you sneak through the first checkpoint. Now, in the canyon, there are 2 small groups of enemies, each less than 10 guys, but the first is easily passed by just staying on the opposite side of the river. The next group is up the hill and slightly harder since they hide in the brush,
but of course they are exposed way too easily, and their dull senses mean your approach is safe almost no matter what. You'll run up the hill and into the facility and get your cutscenes, after which the man on fire will attack. I say boss fight only because this final third is technically a boss fight. It is just hardly a fight in any real sense of the word. There is no back and forth, there is no application of any specific gameplay element or testing of player skill. All you need to do is use Jehudi to pull him into the water. Oh, that was easy. The only reason this last section took so long is because I forgot that for a moment. All I knew was that defeating him involved using the water pool here. Look at how poorly this mission went, and look at the fact that I still got an S. Now we've got the war economy. I know these are supposedly important words to Metal Gear's themes, but why are they tied to such a nothing mission? The premise of the mission is, you guessed it, you go get this guy. He's in the African airport in one of the second story rooms under the air control tower. I accidentally did the normal version, going in the chopper with the hope that I would catch the target looking out the window, and that worked. I did the same thing for the total stealth mission, since remember, Pequod doesn't set off combat alerts. I rode in on the chopper, popped a mist capsule, mowed down everyone in the base, but unfortunately the target didn't show up, so I had to go in and get that guy. Call Pequod again, mission done, sub 5 minute time, S rank. Codename Raven this time. Boss fight again. This time it's Liquid Snake. He's posted up in an African village, the exact same village you cleared in Pitch Dark. Why are we making these maps so big if we're already reusing levels? And he's got his child soldiers patrolling. Since this is a level with cutscenes, I decided to do it normal style, taking 3-star stealth gear and non-lethals. I also made the decision to extract every child soldier I came across. You start out on the dirt road, and there are a few here. You take them out with your sniper. The best place to go next is up on the cliff here. I did get detected, but these aren't exactly the most threatening guys, so it's not a challenge to defend myself. The design issue with this boss fight is that Eli doesn't disarm you at all, so it's trivial to just shoot him over and over with a non-lethal. You'll see me getting tired of CQCing him and finally thinking outside the box and just shooting him. The side op where you fight him again is just as stupid because of this. Gun him down, throw him on the chopper with everybody else, S rank. Close contact, go get those guys. Really, it's a girl and a guy, but you still have to go get them. The enemy has got them at this location, heavily guarded. This enemy count should have been the minimum for any mission critical area. There's no excuse for having less than this when any stun grenade launcher can still make short work of a group this size. Now, the problem is whether these guys take cover and how quickly they can wake each other up. If you let them help their buddies, the mission gets convoluted and takes way longer. Stun everybody, extract everybody, don't forget the shipping containers and the Jeep. Just under 7 minutes. S rank, codename Octopus. Mission 25 is literally the same thing except with child soldiers. Aim true ye vengeful as you go get this guy. Now he is, as with the last mission, at least surrounded by enemies. Being as they are child soldiers, the fact that your approaches are limited at least a little bit helps improve the mission slightly. Yet they are not densely grouped enough, nor vigilant, nor vicious enough for any approach to actually be difficult. Of course, the parasite gear neutralizes any possible difficulty they could have had anyways. So, yeah, another easy S rank. Mission 26 makes 3 go-getters in a row. This one is a missed opportunity for a kill objective since the target is a child trafficker, and I'm not about to extract one of those. Either way, he's over here at this part of the map. Identify the target, shoot him in the head, get out, the end. Mission 27 makes 4. Are you fucking kidding me? Dude, Dude, I put a note here that I'm getting sick of even writing this down in the level analysis, so that should tell you how fed up I am with this shit already. He's here, you go get him, you extract him, the end. S rank. That's all there is to these missions. They suck. Ironically, you would think, hey, Code Talker, that's also a go get this guy mission, right? But as I see it, it has its own meritorious elements which give it a unique identity. You mean doing something with your level design improves the levels? Wow! This is a 2-stage level. The first part involves an encounter with the Skull Soldiers, and the second part involves extracting Code Talker. The first part could easily be better if you couldn't just bypass it by scaling the mountain. Just take your buddy over to the waterfall and scale the cracks in the rocks. To my knowledge, this is the only time you scale the face of an object in the entire game. It's possible and likely that this interaction of climbing is the only one of its kind and exists expressly so that astute and observational players can just avoid the boss fight, because that's exactly how I used it. Remedial to this skip is that the Skull Soldiers keep looking for you the whole time. So once you get up the mountain, it becomes this tense stealth crawl through the jungle before you get to the bridge to the villa. Now, it would be way more tense if the Skull Soldiers were anywhere close to their normal awareness level and lethality. But let's be honest, they're all chumps outside of the next mission. You could have also made it more difficult by having Skull Soldiers be throughout the entire level, rather than just having normal dudes be guarding the villa. I mean, this guy is supposedly Cypher's top human asset. What, they're just gonna chill? They're just gonna let him be guarded by normal guys instead of Skull Soldiers? Are you kidding me? No way. Come on. Bullshit. There are less than 20 guys supposedly guarding someone who is one of Skullface's most important human assets. That doesn't even make sense thematically. Additionally, you don't need to use 95% of the actual villa even on a non-stealth run. They built this whole mansion for you just for you to use none of it, since Code Talker is down in the basement to the left of the entry door. The Assassin's Creed forced walking section. I cannot fucking believe that they had to put this in the game. You could have had this whole conversation if you sprinted to the chopper with him on your back. And if you couldn't, then guess what? That conversation's not important and you cut it, so who cares? It's a ridiculous choice by the designers, totally caving into corporate oversight and industry trends. This is one of the lower points in the franchise. Went back with the Parasite gear, shaved a full 7 minutes off to get my S. Back-to-back boss fights, as the next mission is Metallic Archaea, where you finally fight the skulls on Extreme. The area is an airfield and its hangars. You start at your down chopper with your buddy nearby. The Skull Soldiers are also actually difficult to deal with. They come equipped with what I assume is their own Metallic Archaea. They throw giant chunks of iron at you, which are so big it's not reasonable to try and dodge them out in the open, at least on reaction in Extreme. And on Extreme, they also just kill you very fast in general. So the skulls are finally real Skull Soldiers, guys that kill people. To the detriment of the level, the skulls are not that challenging in the given concentration. For a truly difficult mission, you'd need 8 minimum, and the number of skulls should have increased in Extreme mode, because it's the same number in normal mode. As it is, you can easily group them around the shipping containers and just peek them over and over and over. Were there simply more of them, there could have been a group to flank you. In addition, the skulls don't move nearly as fast as they should. In previous levels, they could pop up right next to you whenever they wanted. But here they move like snails, and they can't effectively catch you in a crossfire unless you're just running around in the runway for some reason. My personal strategy for this level is just abusing peeking with the Molotov, and that's also how I got my S rank. The Skull Soldiers are defeated, and the only thing left for you to do is go shoot Skullface. The next mission is when you infiltrate his base, or at least you're supposed to infiltrate it. This is a large level divided into 3 stages: the outer area and entrance checkpoint, the Bailey, and the Keep, whereafter you will ascend the staircase to the enemy's helipad and receive your ending sequence. I say ending sequence because this is technically not a cutscene, but it can be skipped anyway and has no gameplay. Your drop point is way too far from the area the enemy occupies, and the only reason for this, as far as I can tell, is so that you can get this little spiel about Skullface over your iDroid, which you could have just as easily gotten during the helicopter ride. And of course, if you just change the drop point, it could have been long enough to fit said conversation. The outer part is very easily bypassed. All the enemies are to the right of your approach, and the best entry point into the fortress is to the left. So there's no downside to taking the left entrance at all. It's not significantly worse than if you killed everyone here and went through the arch. The first layer of the fortress is armed, but for some reason aren't really well prepared for you. The garrison just isn't coordinated and moves way too slow. So when you bring out a grenade launcher like I did, they end up staying in close proximity rather than spreading out and get demolished really quickly. There also aren't enough walker gears or heavily armored enemies. The toughest enemies are after this, in the second layer. This section has a labyrinthine group of buildings on the left, which you can run through or over, and the road going through the fortress continues on the right all the way up to the helipad staircase. In this part, you'll have to face the gunship overhead, which can keep you pinned down depending on your entry, but seeing as it just gets insta-pwned with the Molotov, they should have had more than one gunship watching over the base. At least one to keep you in cover while the other tries to get a better angle on you. The trick here is that entering the labyrinthine part, though it is clearly the best cover, is also the slowest to progress due to the floor plan, which means it's good for cover and may help you prevent a full retry, but if done improperly will massively extend your completion time, hurting your score worse than a retry would. This is one of the few times in the game the player is called upon to make a genuine choice in their route through the level, although I'm sure there's some cheesy way to get around this given the massive arsenal of gear you get, besides the parasite mist, because we're just taking that as a given. There are also a lot of in-place guns in this layer and the outer one, but nobody is manning them before you arrive, and nobody jumps on them once the alert goes off. I decided to steal a tank before taking out the last few guys in the keep, then I took the stairs. This whole conversation with Skullface is way less egregious than Code Talker's rambling, since you can skip it. Thank you, mission over. I redid it with the Parasite Mist to get my S rank. Sahelanthropist is the final mission in the first act, and also on Extreme is the final mission in the game, and it is incredibly easy, even on Extreme. Sahelanthropist does not move or attack enough to be a genuine threat, at least one that compares to your high-level weaponry. So the strategy is to start off by attacking the canisters on its back with a grenade launcher, blowing off the oblique and core armor, and then just spam it with your highest damage missile launcher. It will literally never kill you. This boss fight, as they would like to call it, is pathetic and a huge disappointment given how powerful and intimidating Metal Gear Sahelanthropist is made to seem throughout the rest of the game. Under 4 minutes, S rank, codename Orca. Next up, To Know Too Much, another 30-second go-getter. Fuck this, S rank. Oh, and here's your epic Eli boss fight, bro. So amazing. Great gameplay, Kojima. This is also the time I went to retrieve the AI pod and Volgan's carcass. Neither of which are that difficult, and in fact, arguably should have been extra ops if you could have made them more difficult. You know, if anything could have been an extra op, it could have been the important side ops. Cursed Legacy is the same mission as To Know Too Much, except it's with containers instead of a guy. Fucking wow. Can you tell I'm getting tired of this shit yet? At least there's a timer here, even if it starts halfway through the mission, and even if it's so lenient that it might as well not be there. They tried, right? This next mission is kind of a cool idea on paper. You have to search dead drops in these ruins with guys patrolling around. The improvement this mission makes over so many others is that there are a ton of guys in this small concentrated zone. Even with Parasite Mist, it's almost annoying how often I got caught due to the sheer number of guys. There's even more that ride in on a Jeep later. This is only a glimpse into what the enemy placement could have been. It's not too long, and the problem is that the objective is fairly obtuse. On my S rank, it was 5 minutes, 1 second. Finally, a fucking awesome mission. Proxy War Without End is a heavy armor mission, but this time you're actually in danger. You've got about 5 targets, 2 APCs, 1 APC with a full turret, 1 tank, and a gunship. My approach was to go in with the far landing location, as it allows you to take out the first 2 with the door gun. Bringing the Molotov is the best route, since despite the airtime of the round, you can still easily manage safe shots on all the units in this mission, especially since Africa is way flatter than Afghanistan. Apparently, tanks can start shooting at you even without formally triggering an alert, and I didn't notice this until I got surprised right here. Now, if they're firing at me, they should trigger an alert, but the fact that your engagement can be at such great range but still conform to the movement and positioning principles of design is good. Was Kojima scared of this new frontier, of this action, stealth, long-range combat kind of thing? Perhaps, since the number of units to defeat is very low, even lower than the heavy armor mission in the first act. Proxy War Without End? What kind of stupid-ass name is this for a mission with 5 targets? I S-ranked this with Foxhound of all code names, since armored units weren't coded to trigger alerts properly, I suppose. Or maybe they were coded to trigger alerts in this way. I don't know, but they shouldn't have been coded that way if that's how it was. Next up, A Quiet Exit. I believe this is chronologically the final mission in the game, although I still have Shining Lights and Truth to play. A Quiet Exit, I should mention, is only unlocked after you complete a bunch of chores. First off, you have to max out your buddy bond with Quiet. This is a grind if you played through the whole game deploying with actually good buddies. So imagine, if you will, a world where you're only playing Metallic Archaea over and over, trying to get Quiet to shoot the skulls for you. Now that's what I call a proxy war without end, am I right? Then you have to complete these stupid mandatory side ops, which are one and dones and aren't scored, of course. They aren't even hard. Why are they there? They both boil down to go to this place. You can't just beat the previous mission and then, I don't know, get the next mission. No, that would be much too reasonable. That would make sense. You have to jump through flaming rings like some kind of circus clown in order to play the entirety of the game you bought for $7.50. Okay? Listen, if I spend money on a game, I expect to be able to play it. Locking missions behind one and done meta progression and narrative is crap, because let's call it like it is, putting narrative before gameplay is bad. Do not do that. Speaking of bullshit, the landing zone in this mission is pointlessly far away from the actual mission itself, which only begins when you come around the mountain and view this cutscene. Now that the mission proper has started, I must say this is perhaps the hardest mission in the game. You are inundated with powerful heavy armor units and regulars, and de facto confined to a very small space along a small line, from one side of the road near the sandbags, which the cutscene starts you at, to the other end of the road before the turn where it proceeds away from the building. Only the facade of the building itself is used, since you obviously can't shoot at distant enemies from inside the building. This is one of the only missions that still took me a significant amount of replays to get the S rank on, because it's actually challenging. Despite the fact that this is one of the times you should reasonably be able to deploy a tank and use it, the actual area of operation is tiny, and though there are a few spaces to get hull down or even turret down, and the map is actually in general well designed for heavy armor combat, if you step outside of the mission zone even slightly, you just lose. Any attempt to go out into these dunes to start confronting the enemy ends up with you accidentally taking cover and being essentially disqualified. So you're relegated to the one part of the road in front of the building, getting owned because being a tank, you don't have much space. Now, you could argue that this is just me being bad at driving the tank, and I would agree to an extent. The tank is a bit unwieldy to control at first, since changing scopes and armaments while trying to manage your hull orientation in relation to your turret is all pretty confusing when you aren't incentivized to ever use something this massively powerful throughout the game until now. This time I decided I'd just rough it with a Molotov, then switch to the swarm launcher in the later waves. This all felt very cheesy on both ends, since, as I said before, tanks can see you from across the map, yet not trigger alerts, meaning on this mission they'll snipe you from hull down in the distance when they are just barely visible. This is the point after which I just snapped and started hitting continue rather than restart. Unsurprisingly, cheesing the mission worked after a few tries, including retries, and I somehow got the S after like 15 total attempts. I don't know how many retries, but like damn, it was a lot of retries. Once you kill the tanks though, and yes, the first part is only complete when all the heavy armor is destroyed, not when all the enemies are neutralized, you get another forced walking section. 2, in fact. These aren't skippable, only the cutscenes are. Why? Why ruin a potentially good mission with crap? All it can do is denigrate the end result if it's not skippable.
Shining lights in truth, these missions suck. I did a quiet exit out of order, so we'll talk about Shining Lights first. There's no challenge, there's no gameplay, it's not part of the core game, it's a playable cutscene, or rather a cutscene that you are forced for some reason to play. Before you say, well, it's to make you feel how Venom felt, you're playing through his perspective rather than being an inactive observer. Okay, but the point of the game until now was that you could control what Venom did. You could choose to be a hero or demon. In this mission, you don't choose anything. In role-playing, this is called being railroaded. The host of the game forces your character through specific means to take certain actions that are not at the agency of your character, of your role-playing. It is the same case here. The devs, who had until now given you multiple approaches to gameplay, now only give you one option. You have to kill these guys. You don't get the option of any other approach or even any other way of killing them. It's incredibly stupid, since if you don't have a choice, if you aren't playing the game, then why is it not a cutscene? And furthermore, how are you a demon? How are you evil if you don't have a choice? I completely understand why this portion of the game exists thematically, but that it is a mission and not just a cutscene does not make sense in terms of the overall game design. The final mission, Truth, forces you to replay the first mission in its entirety, and the first mission sucked. The gameplay of the mission itself doesn't even change. It gets shorter. What's worse is that all the cutscenes you have 100% already seen are not skippable. This stupid whole W section is not skippable. There is no gameplay here. There is no stealth where you are being led through a theme park attraction by Big Boss, by Ishmael. If the Code Talker and Quiet Exit forced walking sections were not the gameplay low point of Metal Gear as a franchise so far, then this certainly is. Fucking garbage. Easily the worst part of the game. Okay, finally we get the ranking of all the missions in the game. But before we address that, we have to address that this game desperately needed an extra ops category. Side ops are basically ways to grind. They aren't scored, so there's no real merit in doing them outside of meta progression. Extra ops, like Peace Walker and Ground Zeroes, could have easily expanded the scope of scored missions while also compressing them, cutting the fat, so to speak, and making them more concise, challenging, focused, and unique. If I say something should have been an extra op, that is what I mean. I don't mean they should have just be sent to another category of operation as is. It's not that I think these missions are bad per se. In fact, I don't think there are many missions in the game which are bad in themselves, so much that the majority of the missions as a whole lack unique identities in objective design, with which they should have been differentiated. If something were to be an extra op, it would have been to solve the problem of lacking fast, scored missions, while simultaneously not bloating the main mission list with what would appear to be filler. So missions 0, 2, 43, and 46 should have been cutscenes, and all cutscenes should have been replayable in a cutscene theater. Missions that should have been extra ops are 3 through 5, 7, Occupation Forces, meaning 8 and 49, 10, 14, Footprints of Phantoms, meaning 15 and 36, Trader's Caravan, meaning 16 and 37, 17, 19, The War Economy, meaning 21 and 47, 22, 24 through 26, 32, 35, and 38. All of these missions lack challenge and identity in ways that should, by design of their objectives, relegate them to extra ops. Perhaps these missions could even be in series with each other, as the mission series of Peace Walker were done. Regardless of what should have been done with these missions, as they are all facile filler. This leaves Where the Bees Sleep, which is 6, Back Up, Back Down, which is 9 and 34, Cloaked in Silence, which is 11 and 40, Pitch Dark, which is 13 and 44, Blood Runs Deep, which is 18, Voices, which is 20, The White Mamba, which is 23, Code Talker, which is 28 and 48, Metallic Archaea, which is 29 and 42, Skullface, which is 30, Sahelanthropus, which is 31 and 50, Proxy War Without End, and A Quiet Exit, which is 45. Had all these missions been expanded, as with 34 and 41, or combined, as with perhaps mission 30 and 50, or 48 and 42, or made more concise, as with 6, 20, and 44, you could have easily had a solid primary body of missions that form a cohesive, well-structured campaign. However, this is not the case, and I must rank them as they are. Thus, in reverse order, from worst to best, we'll probably go 6, 20, 31 and 50, 28 and 48, 30, 41, 9 and 34, 13 and 44, 45, 29 and 42, 11 and 40, the best mission in the game being 18. I'm still split on which between Cloaked in Silence on Extreme or Blood Runs Deep is the best mission in the game. Although 40 is incredibly challenging and on internal limitations, not just based on the approach I used, to the point that it's probably the hardest mission on the game, Blood Runs Deep has a superior layout which employs, at the limits, a much greater possible arrangement of gear. I also think the map design in terms of enemy offensive capabilities is still excellent, even if in practice the AI does not challenge the player that much. For a final note on the missions, most of the important side ops could have been made extra ops too. Side op 82 should have just been a main op and contain perhaps mission 40 and 12. Side ops 113, 143, 144, and 150 could have all been extra ops. To summarize the problem with Phantom Pain's missions, it's that none of them are truly outstanding. Even the top 3 out of the ones I ranked are still just okay in terms of net quality. This is made worse by the fact that so many of the main ops should not have been main ops at all. They feel like busy work, and I don't usually bring up how I feel about things, but that is how this whole campaign feels on replay. What, if anything, is missing from this game that could have given it some longevity is an infinite or survival mode against heavy armor. A Quiet Exit, Proxy War Without End, and Back Up, Back Down could have all been turned into survival score attack missions in their own right. And if you took Quiet Exit and expanded the mission zone a lot, you could have had a slam dunk easily. I must finally speak about the significance of the chopper, since it is an integral aspect of the Phantom Pain's gameplay identity. The fact that the chopper intro isn't skippable is easily one of the stupidest decisions made for this game. You have to watch an almost minute-long cutscene every time you start a mission, and often you won't need to use the gun either. In fact, the only time it makes sense to watch this is when you're making a contested landing, in which you need to use the door gun. It is tedious, okay? Just get rid of it. Or they could have had two options for landing. If you wanted to fast rope down, you could just cut to starting the mission. If you wanted to do a contested landing or use the door gun, you could pick that. I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking with it as it is, though. The problem is that they've so well integrated it as a real object that since enemies can shoot at it, skipping the intro becomes a balancing decision as well. Quite the wicked problem. Nonetheless, the integration itself is a cool design aspect and could have easily become a merit rather than a detriment if they fine-tuned and expanded it. I will reiterate it as a final point in this section that the AI is just too fucking stupid in this game. They don't adapt to your tactics, they don't coordinate, they don't even recognize explosives or disperse when you start using them. They barely take cover. Dealing with enemies in this is like shooting fish in a barrel, and evading them is just as easy. The game lacks an inherent foundational difficulty that is meant to be modified by the adaptive difficulty. And because of this, it never truly becomes hard, no matter what part of the game you're playing, or however the game chooses to adapt to your gameplay.
Prior to addressing the themes in writing, it must be stated that Phantom Pain does not integrate its narrative with the gameplay. Whereas 3, Peace Walker, and Ground Zeroes all integrate narrative portions while still making them skippable, the Phantom Pain segregates gameplay and narrative such that the narrative of the work is experienced only once, with no theater to replay it, and no way to know when a great number of them will even play to begin with. As I mentioned before, I received a cutscene for Quiet way after I beat a Quiet exit. All the essential information is contained in iDroid cassettes, which are almost completely extraneous to gameplay. They don't play over loadout selection, they don't play over loading screens, they don't keep playing after a chopper extraction, and if they stop, it doesn't save your spot. Does Kojima know how tapes actually work? He's certainly old enough to have lived with them. In this case, he should know that tapes don't rewind themselves. They aren't digital audio files. They are physical lengths of tape on reels which need to be wound back up after use. So, if he wants to be all retro with what is the lion's share of the game's narrative, why do the tapes start over from the beginning every time you play them? The script writing, at least, is far more mature and, shall we say, natural than the previous games. Characters can finally speak as though they were characters and not info dumps on obscure facts and background information. They have been released from the duty of establishing a knowledge base for everything they say. It still happens sometimes, like when Miller claims that he and Vic invented war as a business. War has been a business venture far longer than Kojima thinks. Even though the alternate course of history that Kojima has outlined for this world is based upon an immature understanding of real-life history, the delivery of it to the player through the drama is at least subtle and well executed. Some of it, however, is actually really bad, especially some of the English voice acting from Huey and Skullface. But I don't blame them as much since, for the most part, they have to read all the worst lines.
I did it! Revenge!
With the exception of Skullface's speech, which is actually okay. The cutscene direction has a much worse ratio of good to bad. So many have ridiculously long takes that could have been made shorter. more concise, because as it is, most of the story is edited like syrup. It's not a good fit when the gameplay is roughly as fast as Ground Zeroes, which didn't have such glacially cut video sections. Ground Zeroes in general is just much more polished on its non-gameplay features than the Phantom Pain. I figure I should mention that I do find Kojima's Hollywood influences to be more interesting this time around, especially from 24 Redemption, and other things from 24 are here and there. There's Tears of the Sun, Rambo 3, and a few others perhaps. You could object and say it doesn't take inspiration from that, but in certain parts it's quite clear. If we had a fully developed game, they might have added a lot more interaction with the locals that was present in these movies, and of course some of the more morbid and taboo subjects covered as well, which Kojima mentioned in some of the marketing for the game. The character of Quiet is just an unnecessary and hollow addition to the game. There's little purpose here, and what artistic intention is there is obfuscated by the impurity of her presentation. I really take issue with this character because this woman is too scantily dressed to have any serious presentation in the story. I don't object to Stephanie Jewson being in the game. In fact, I think she looks better in real life than she does in the game, because the game's facial generation is actually quite bad and does everyone a disservice. Especially, I would say, Huey. Huey and Quiet probably have the worst face rendering in the game. The character of Psycho Mantis is a non-presence, as is the Man on Fire. The Man on Fire is more present. He matters more. He has more significance to more significance to Venom Snake than Psycho Mantis, who really doesn't need to be in this narrative at all. I don't see the artistic significance of him. Even if the completeness of the narrative makes them both seem extraneous to most events. The lamest part about the Man on Fire is, if anything, that he is on fire and not a cool lightning or thunder guy. The Colonel's whole gimmick was lightning. And sure, he's obviously on fire now because fire is a weaker reaction, or I think it's a colder form of plasma or something than lightning, but it could have just been way cooler to make him like a freaky sound guy or a thunder kind of guy or something. I don't know. I mean, that's not my job. My point is that Man on Fire is not that cool. It's not like him being the Man on Fire hides his identity. If you've played 3, if you even know anything about 3, you can tell who he is the moment he appears in his Colonel trench coat or uniform or whatever it is. As for Psycho Mantis, let's be honest, why is he here? What is the significance of him being here? There is the child exploitation angle that, he's being exploited like Liquid Snake, and Liquid Snake is being exploited like the African child soldiers, and it makes them, there's empathy going on there or something, maybe, and they all want revenge, and there's the vengeance angle. Everybody wants revenge on everybody. But if the artisanship of vengeance in the narrative sucks, then why are they here? You should have just cut them. In fact, you can just cut the entire first mission. There's so much crap in this game that doesn't need to be here. It would have been better just to make it like a pieced together series of vignettes from Venom Snake's life than to have all this crap in it. It would have been way more interesting and, cryptic. It's already cryptic, but you could play that up more if it's just vignettes, if it's just snapshots of his life. As they are, Liquid Snake and Psycho Mantis, they just have next to no characterization and are pretty much scenery. Even Volgin's menace and raging glare has more artistic gravity than the pointless presence of Liquid Snake and Psycho Mantis. For Ocelot, does he ever mention where he got his accent? Like where he developed it? I suppose he was hanging out in Dixie training his 6-shooter skills for years between 3 and now, right? Honestly, an explanation like that could have been expected from Kojima if he ever expanded on where it came from. I'm really not interested in looking it up because for all I know it could have just been a artistic fiat on Kojima's part, but I don't object to it. I mean, I suppose it's not impossible that he got that accent. You know, if it's part of his character, it's part of his character, whatever, right? The Ocelot Miller dynamic of devil and angel on your shoulder, respectively, is definitely a cool way to juxtapose the characters and their mindset concerning the development of Mother Base and the Diamond Dogs. Of course, because you have so little interactions with just the supporting cast, it ends up being underused and sort of pointless. In fact, Ocelot has a very minor presence in the whole series. It doesn't feel like a proper sort of duality happening, even though it's characterized that way. Miller himself, I think, he's okay. They just punished Miller too much. He's a broken guy, and the fact that he's blind and crippled, come on. You know, like that's just silly, and it gives him much more. They make him much more spiteful than insightful, which is what Miller was before. And if anything, he should be insightful and vengeful. I don't know. Kojima sucks as a writer. He's not that competent. My point of all this, covering the supporting cast. The twist is stupid. Not in the sense that the premise is bad, but that there is a twist at all. It would have been perfectly acceptable for us to know that Venom isn't Vic at the beginning of the game. What is the merit of this big reveal, other than marketing? I see no artistic value in shenanigans like this. There are other twists in this series that I don't oppose, and that is because they are consistent with the thematic identity of the games in which they occur. What is the significance in us not knowing Venom's true identity? If you say to show us that we or anyone can be Big Boss, my objection is that we aren't Ahab any more than we are Ishmael, and we've been playing Ishmael in previous games. And furthermore, the scoring system is how we become Big Boss. We choose to be Big Boss, and my point in the beginning of the game outlining the fact that the scoring system is different is because the mentality of who Big Boss is has changed, at least on Kojima's part, and that's the significance of it. It's not the significance of like a secret twist that like, oh yeah, we changed the scoring system because we had a twist at the end of the game. Are you kidding me? No. Kojima is a silly guy, but I don't think he's that silly. The point is that we can be Big Boss no matter what game we're playing. This is done through the scoring system. In this game, the codename system demonstrates that rather than the scoring itself, specifically with the codename Foxhound. Also the hero points, right? But technically, punished Venom Snake as he is can become a hero or demon. It's not set in stone. For the scoring, though, if someone can S-rank with the Foxhound codename consistently, aren't they Big Boss in this game just as much as they were in 3, Ground Zeroes, and Peace Walker, given they played for score on those as well? On the other hand, isn't the player not Big Boss at all if he chooses to abandon the just war philosophy and become a demon? And if he does that in 3 or Peace Walker, then what is the significance of him playing the actual Big Boss? What makes us Big Boss is not who we play, but how we play. And this can never be concealed from us by trickery or marketing shenanigans. Thus, it would be best to simply show that we are not the Big Boss we think we are, that we are not Ishmael but Ahab, and give us the moral agency to become him anyways, to become him as a hero or demon. I just don't see it necessary, especially since there's no mystery. It's just a sudden reveal, a shock twist. Even if it were a mystery, some of the best mysteries are given to a character rather than the audience. Furthermore, the fact that Ahab's true identity is unknown to him deprives him of that essential quality of choice. How is he a demon if that's what he was indoctrinated to become no matter what, and is thus absolved of guilt? It is ridiculous that through the entire game we are called a demon or a bad dude, when hero and demon points are the most persistent mechanic in the game. And this happens to you even if you're a hero. Even if you get the gold hero achievement, they still call you a demon. This is one of the reasons I have such a problem with the research platform massacre. You spend the entire game deciding to become a hero or a demon, and then the game deprives itself of its own mechanics. And not just any mechanics, but actually good narrativist mechanics. When do those ever occur? You had something, Kojima. You were so close. What was the point of letting you control the moral decisions of punished Venom Snake throughout the game if the narrative just takes it away from you no matter what? Kojima trips himself up yet again with a theme park sequence meant to deprive the player of the very capacities he bestowed them with. Now, let us consider what is likely true, that Kojima did have an artistic intention here, being that, of course, the phantom pain is the loss of our comrades, which will be unavoidable so long as we fight. In this case, don't you think he should have made the level good instead of one that forces you to accrue 5,000 demon points against your will? If it's against my will, if I'm forced to play this mission to beat the game, and I have no control over the outcome of the level, then how am I a demon? The level isn't even logically consistent with itself. If it was evil, then why don't I have a choice? That's not what evil is, dumb fuck. This is no different than forcing the player to watch a cutscene of Venom gunning down his subordinates and then doling you out 6 gorillion demon points. How are you a demon? You know, an angel who chose to be evil, who chose not to serve, if the game takes away your power to choose? How could he say that anyone who wishes to partake in war, even just war, is someone choosing to be evil? So the point of the level is clearly that peace is impossible without bloodshed. Clearly Kojima wanted to state something like that here. He killed the so-called Angel of Peace in the prologue to this game. So in this case, if he's saying that peace must come through bloodshed, you know, through victory, like he stated in Peace Walker, then how am I the bad guy for shedding that blood? When it comes to just war philosophy, after 4 games, I just have to assume Kojima is genuinely just some kind of ignorant retard. He has no idea what he's talking about and no idea how to construct art on this topic. Back to Ahab's indoctrination, it goes completely against the idea that the MSF or Diamond Dogs or Outer Heaven or whatever Vic Boss's organization goes by operates on voluntary service. Even if a soldier is taken by Fulton, soldiers can be dismissed and can leave of their own accord if their morale is low enough or they aren't getting paid. I've seen talk that brainwashing is involved to recruit soldiers, but where is the evidence of this? Ocelot says outright that the reason soldiers stay at Mother Base is because they love Big Boss and are loyal to him. One might bring up that Revolver Ocelot is a liar and Ahab's indoctrinator, but what he says is consistent with how soldiers act around you. No matter what, you're my CO. It's also consistent with how Miller and Vic Boss operated in Peace Walker, which preceded all this violence. So, if Outer Heaven is such a cult, why is everyone free to leave? You think they could fire members if this was a secretive brainwashing cult? If Ahab's service as punished Venom Snake is not voluntary, it means something deep within Vic Boss has changed. And that is where the treachery of the lie comes from. Just who is Venom Snake? Why does he exist? To know this, we must understand that Venom was not originally created by Vic or even Ocelot, but by Zero. Now, one might say that Zero is no longer a part of Cypher, but Skullface still uses the terms Cypher and Zero synonymously, even years after he mortally wounded Zero. Zero says that he created another snake, so this punished Venom snake was intended to be an asset of Cypher, of Zero, in his planned war economy. And this is the most depressing part of the twist. It recontextualizes all the mercy shown by Venom against Miller's wishes to be arguably subconscious acts in accordance with Cypher's plan. Destroying the XOF and Skullface, sparing Quiet, sparing Huey. It's a thoroughly morbid perspective on the whole tale. Yet, how allegiant to Cypher is Venom? Perhaps Ocelot, in his loyalty to Vic over Zero, took his time indoctrinating Venom to cleanse him of Cypher's memes. However, if we are to simply extend the benefit of the doubt to Zero, we might say that he absconded his chauvinistic pursuit of the philosopher's goals in the creation of Venom, and as his last act as a CO, preserved the true reflection of Vic within Venom. This is, however, unlikely, as between Zero and Snake, Snake was always the soldier, and Zero the espionage agent, so much so that Ocelot designates him he who controls information. It would be unlikely for Zero to give up this path merely for friendship's sake, when friendship is exactly what he had leveraged against Snake by using Paz to try and steal Metal Gear Zeke. If we recall the words of our previous appraisal, Vic Boss does not mentor traitors to justice, and this meme perhaps overpowered all of Zero's indoctrination. But Vic Boss is no longer. Was Ocelot allegiant to Vic Boss or Big Boss? This I genuinely do not know. The foundation of Venom's identity is thus splintered. In order of development, it originates from Ahab, Vic, Cypher, Big Boss through Ocelot, and finally Miller. That's 6 different people, 5 other than himself. All these ideas, memes in a primordial soup of Ahab's comatose mind, gave rise to the figure who smashed the mirror that we call Punished Venom Snake, a man denied his destiny. What does that mean? The purpose of Venom is to show the player that, contrary to what the Project of the Terrible Children had in mind, destiny is in the memes you choose to embody, not your genes over which you have no control. Unlike all the other central characters of this story, who chose which memes they would embody, Ahab had this taken from him, had his destiny taken away during his indoctrination. Punished Venom Snake is, however, in his choices after awakening, a refutation of Cypher's ideals. That is, the destruction of any memes except itself, as a predatory mimetic organism. It must operate within a world of words, of ideas. One would think that Skullface is thus Cypher's phantom, being a body against memes, but in reality Skullface is Zero's phantom, and Cypher is both of them together. Likewise, Big Boss is both Vic and Venom, the mind and the body, the Venom that Zero had been looking for ever since Snake turned against him. It is poetic in this sense that the Snake thought more loyal was the one who fatally poisoned his master. As punished Venom Snake acts in the place of Vic Boss, Skullface and the XOF act in the place of Zero. 2 men, 2 bodies, who act in place of their comatose minds, but only one of them truly frees himself from the tyranny of his unchosen memes. These phantoms are fundamentally different from clones. They are the mirror of the original, not a replication, but an inversion. It was clearly Zero's hope that this inversion would be allegiant to him by reversing, mirroring the ideals of Vic Boss. But having been taken off the chessboard by his own Venom, his own Phantom, he lost control of the situation, ceding leadership of Cypher to his own deep state AI network called the Patriots, and thus Venom was able to free himself from the despotism of a destiny denied. Since the identity of Cypher is now decentralized, it means that anyone who believes in its ideals and acts for them is arguably a part of it. It is a colonial organism, wherein Zero and Skullface, despite their disagreements, are nothing but the two chief zooids within this organism. What is Cypher's ideal? What makes it an organism? As I said, Cypher, deeper than just the destruction of all memes, operates to bring about the ideal meme of the philosophers. And I quote, "This world will become one. I have found the way. The world that the boss envisioned will finally become a reality. Race, tribal affiliations, national borders, even our faces will be irrelevant. This plan is an abomination. It means to eliminate the inherent qualities and natural goods of man as a species, as well as the possibility of sovereignty by anyone, much less the people who need it the most." Skullface and Zero both fight for versions of this plan, where Zero's is the mimetic plan with the Patriots AI system, and Skullface's genetic with his ethnic cleansers and metallic archaea. Mind and body, one with words, ideas, and one without them. By not only abandoning, but fighting against this ideal, Vic Boss is the greater of the two mimetic descendants of the boss. This mimetic descendancy, that is, memes, are important to differentiate from genes, where Ocelot, for example, is a genetic descendant of the boss. He does not carry her memes. This is also important because Venom, who is not a genetic descendant of Big Boss, does carry his memes. And vice versa for Liquid Snake. Is Skullface just as disconnected from the Patriots as the Phantom of Zero, as Venom Snake is disconnected from Big Boss, as the Phantom of Vic Boss? If anything is the phantom pain, this is that loss of the original language of heroism and despotism that these phantoms feel. They are copies whose original was destroyed, and Skullface is clearly the more mad of the two, having personally dispatched his original. The phantom pain cannot be defined so stringently, though. Its mimetic heritage goes back to the boss herself, such that we can argue that the true inheritor of the boss's will is someone who can exercise this phantom pain from themselves, no less, which, as said before, is the unavoidable wound in the heart of heroes, the loss that must be felt one day or another. In this sense, we have to go all the way and say that Punished Venom Snake is the true Big Boss. Chiefly in the natural realm, the lion's share of the accomplishment and feats of war by Big Boss actually come from Venom Snake. As for the spirit, the beliefs, attitudes, the perspective on life called Vic Boss, it died in that helicopter crash, and what remained permitted this Frankenstein of soldiers, Punished Venom Snake, to take up his mantle. Yet it was not his indoctrination, but his moral agency in pursuing true ideals greater than the boss, ideals which she failed to embody, that makes him this true hero, Big Boss, the one greater than the boss herself. The boss failed by negligence, by cowardly liberalism and frail allegiance to the philosophers. The previous Big Boss failed by willingly abandoning the greater memes of the boss, from which his name was derived. You can hear this in the call with Ocelot in the beginning of the Truth cassettes. Human Shield using sick men, nurses, and doctors to cover his escape. Ocelot is completely fine with this, which is not surprising, but Big Boss, who is clearly no longer Vic Boss, is also completely fine with it. His moral center, his allegiance to a just battle, was destroyed in that helicopter crash.
Perhaps it was the trauma of Paz's womb being removed in the same manner, and for a similar purpose as the boss's womb was. He had lost allies before, certainly, but Miller and him had placed so much hope in Paz that it was likely the image of her, the angel of peace, disgraced so egregiously, and in the same manner as Vic's mother figure, that finally tore him apart. Skullface, even before Paz's womb detonated, had defeated Vic Boss. Recall that I said prior, the small victory of Big Boss here was that despite the grievous torture inflicted on his allies, they never betrayed him. So it stands to reason the true tragedy was that Paz was allegiant to a Big Boss who no longer existed. A phantom pain if she ever had one. Venom is the same way. But what makes him different, what makes him superior to the heroes before, is that he can harness this phantom pain. He does not fear the fight, but embraces it. The delusions of liberalism, the false promise of peace, the false morality of the philosophers, these have no hold on him. That is, he is free. And when we say free, liberty, freedom, etc., we do not mean freedom as in the freedom to pursue evil degeneracy, but the freedom from degeneracy and materialistic despotism. His actions come in greater accordance to true metaphysics than any of the snakes prior. Venom Snake, in finally seeing that the measure of morality for warriors is not war or peace, but rather heroic or demonic action, liberates himself from the foolish materialist memes of the boss, leaving behind Zero, Foxhound, and even the MSF, embracing the Diamond Dogs, the ones who live for victory and sacrifice rather than mere peace, who are of the spirit rather than matter. These ideals of the Diamond Dogs, who live on always in the men who choose to fight for them, and who fight with them, are memes beyond words, and for this reason are immune to the mimetic predators who exist in worlds of words. The apex of these predators is clearly the XOF, Skullface, whose entire existence revolves around consuming all words and replacing them with a language of nukes, of metallic archaea. Does Skullface not know that the one whose lingua franca with his Diamond Dogs is the phantom pain of loss, whose mother tongue is the moral ideal of heroism, is the one who stood before him? The being he intended to create had already been born against his intentions in the punished venom of the snake he slew 9 years ago. That is exactly why this monologue was given to the correct person. You may jest that he waited 9 years to say it all to the wrong guy, but in reality he waited 9 years thinking incorrectly that he needed to say this to Big Boss. The one who actually needed to hear it was sitting in front of him when he said it. What do we mean when we talk about words and what is beyond them or beneath them? I must introduce you to a work which by pure circumstance of recollection did I connect to the phantom pain. Yukio Mishima's essay, Sun and Steel, talks about the relation of words to the body, the mind in the body, the cult of the hero, and shared suffering. Are not all of these present in the phantom pain, and not only present, but central themes? Kojima, if he is as well read as everyone would suppose, has certainly engaged with one of Japan's most famous modern authors, and thus I do not see it out of the realm of possibility that he took influence in his own work. We shall begin with the metaphor of the apple, and first with the apple of words, that is, Skullface. To quote, "This existence is of an odd kind, like a transparent apple whose core is fully visible from the outside, and the only endorsement of such existence lies in words. It is the classical type of existence experienced by the solitary humanistic man of letters. Just as Mishima describes himself in his room, in the night steeped in nocturnal thoughts which have no basis in flesh, in sun or steel, so too is Skullface without
out his native tongue, corroded, as Mishima would say, by words from the inside out, being invaded by the memes of Cypher. He has nothing with which to affirm his existence as separate, except his plan of liberation and his revenge. The other apple is the healthy apple, which is, quote, not called into existence by words, unquote. The core of this apple is not visible from the outside, and Mishima continues, at the heart of that apple, shut up within the flesh of the fruit, the core lurks in darkness, tremblingly anxious to find some way to reassure itself that it is a perfect apple, unquote. It cannot be seen with the eyes, but the only way to see its core, because it is not endorsed by words, is with the senses, those eyes. And the solution is, as Mishima says, for a knife to be plunged deep into the apple so that it is split open and the core is exposed to the light. Yet, then the existence of the cut apple falls into fragments. The core of the apple sacrifices existence for the sake of seeing. Mishima ideates death in one way or another throughout this essay. But does this sense of death, where the true ideal becomes visible in some way, not recall the death of Vic Boss? One would think that the healthy apple is Vic Boss, but this is only true in the past tense. The life cycle of its memes and genes have already been cut open, so to speak, and the cutting open was in that helicopter crash, where Skullface had defeated him. And I quote, "A blow is successful if, at that instant, the opponent's body fits into that hollow in space and assumes a form precisely identical with it. This is the space wherein which Skullface waited to cut open Vic Boss, but in this perfect blow he exposed his opponent to seeing. And thus Zero took this final truest moment, as Mishima would have it in his essay, of Vic Boss's being and imprinted it upon punished Venom Snake." Remember also in Metal Gear that psychic powers, ghosts, and other paranormal things are actually real. It is not impossible that he took an actual psychic snapshot, so to speak, and printed it onto Venom's mind. Of course, it's a reach, but the idea that Cypher had more than one Esper under its control isn't the craziest in the world. Regardless, it was an indoctrination based on the truest form of Snake's being, that is, Vic Boss, that meant punished Venom Snake would become something greater than these metaphorical apples searching for their core. He had already found his core. He was built upon it. He was born in it. However, in what sense is he himself not endorsed by words if he is someone created by mimetic indoctrination? What makes him different from Skullface, who operates entirely upon words, upon memes, and can only know who he is by the language of another, of Cypher, of Zero? Punished Venom Snake engaged in shared suffering, and I quote, "For shared suffering, more than anything else, is the ultimate opponent of verbal expression. For, though verbal expression may convey pleasure or grief, it cannot convey shared pain. Though pleasure may be readily fired by ideas, only bodies, placed under the same circumstances, can experience a common suffering." And later, the tragic quality of the group was also necessary, the quality that constantly raised the group out of the abandon and torpor into which it was prone to lapse, leading it on to ever-mounting shared suffering, and so to death, which was the ultimate suffering. The group must be open to death, which meant, of course, that it must be a community of warriors. The shared suffering is what endorsed Ahab before and after his transformation into punished Venom Snake. It was this tragic band of warriors, the MSF under Vic Boss, which was destroyed in that singular moment of truest existence, and the Diamond Dogs, which from that exposed core they transformed into, by which he was endorsed. Skullface shares suffering with no one, that is, not a group, but only an imperfect, incomplete being of Snake, naked snake. He has been hollowed out and corroded by the memes of Cypher, and has no, quote, concept of the hero, unquote, as Mishima puts it. I quote, "If the concept of the hero is a physical one, then just as Alexander the Great acquired heroic stature by modeling himself on Achilles, the conditions necessary for becoming a hero must be both a ban on originality and a true faithfulness to a classical model. Unlike the words of a genius, the words of a hero must be selected as the most impressive and noble from among ready-made concepts, and at the same time, they, more than any other words, constitute a splendid language of the flesh." Because Skullface sees himself as a genius and not a hero, and cannot speak the language of flesh, of muscularity, and sun, and steel, but is nocturnal, in an existence etched out and corroded by the words of Cypher, but with no flesh to be etched upon, he goes utterly mad. The madness of not knowing one's own mother tongue, the madness of being hollowed out by the memes of another who you did not choose, of knowing liberty only through the language of metallic archaea, is what brought Skullface to his own doom, even after all he had achieved. As the, quote, eye of self-awareness, as Mishima says, necessarily is used on some self to be aware of, an invisible self. Quote, it addresses the muscles as follows. I admit you do not seem to be an illusion, but if so, I would like you to show how you function in order to live and move. Show me your proper functions and how you fulfill your proper aims, unquote. Continuing, and I quote, thus the muscles start working in accordance with the demands of self-awareness. That, precisely, is when the knife of the foe must come cutting into the flesh of the apple, or rather, the body. Blood flows, existence is destroyed, and the shattered senses give existence as a whole its first endorsement, closing the logical gap between seeing and existing. And this is death. This mad hollowness is made more insane by the fact that it was he who closed the logical gap between the sight of and the existence of Vic Boss. He, in his quest for vengeance, inadvertently immortalized this meme, indirectly created the punished Venom Snake, the true Big Boss. He is so by furtherance of that perfect meme, Vic Boss, where the so-called actual boss disappears into the shadows, the world of words, the nocturnal word which is not endorsed by action. Punished Venom Snake is denied his destiny as the unique identity Ahab, and is selected as a most impressive and noble true faithfulness to the heroic model of Vic Boss. One would think that his destiny being hollowed out, corroded by these memes, would drive him just as mad, but it is Miller and Ocelot who share his suffering, who, along with the Diamond Dogs, are links in shared suffering, in the cult of the hero Big Boss, all enchained in the brotherly bearing of arms, who altogether hold him back from the demoniac abyss which Skullface cast himself into long ago. Simply, it is because Skullface rejected heroism that he was brought to his end, and it is because Punished Venom Snake endorsed his new existence with the memes perfected in the death crucible of his former mentor, and the shared suffering of his brothers, that he transcended being the mere body of the serpent, and became the true successor to the Vic Boss who saved the world from nuclear Armageddon. I will always be with you. Plant your roots in me. Punished Venom Snake makes of his men more than mere ashes, and this is how he, quote, endorses his existence, unquote, his freedom, with the shining light of a warrior's brotherhood, saying, we are Diamond Dogs. Under this shared sun, that subconscious experience, quote, at the moment, when I first realized that the use of strength and the ensuing fatigue, the sweat and the blood, could reveal to my eyes that sacred, ever-swaying blue sky that the shrine bearers gazed on together, and could confer the glorious sense of being the same as others. I already had a foresight, perhaps, of that as yet distant day when I should step beyond the realm of individuality into which I had been driven by words and awakened to the meaning of the group. It was this shared sky wherein which the sun of death burned. As Mishima says, quote, a sun full of the fierce dark flames of feeling, a sun of death that would never burn the skin, yet gave forth a still stranger glow, unquote, of the true identity of Vic Boss was fulfilled, brought forth from the shared suffering of the Diamond Dogs in the service of punished Venom Snake. However, what of the other true Big Boss? With Punished Venom taking on the actual mantle of Big Boss and surpassing the previous figure, the old Jack, as we'll call him, is left but a zombie of his own ideals, an undead image in the mirror to haunt his phantom. And that brings us to the ultimate question. If Jack cannot fulfill the ideals of Big Boss, or rather, won't, and Punished Venom can and intends to, then was the Outer Heaven uprising in the intention of Jack's or not? If Jack's intention is that Punished Venom becomes a demon, then it stands to reason that it would have been. However, this would mean that if the player chose to make Punished Venom a hero, that retroactively the uprising would go against Jack's will. It could also be the inverse, but the ambiguity as to whether the Outer Heaven uprising was part of the plan, so to speak, and how that can retroactively change due to the action of the player, whether he chooses to become a hero or a demon, is a very intriguing end to a video game. Let us also see that the default bionic hand is red, and the number of this game is signified with a red V, which of course has multiple meanings besides Venom and 5. One of them being victory. Is this the victory we saw in Peace Walker? The lies of the trichotomy? Absolutely not. If the V in Metal Gear Solid 5 is made by Venom's hand, that is, if peace comes from Punished Venom Snake, then it would be done with the left, not the right. And of that we can surely glean not the despotic materialism of the trichotomy, but the victory of the spirit and the sacrifice of heroes. The Phantom Pain leaves me ambivalent, and it had a lot of potential if its release had been partitioned. As it is, the Phantom Pain has a great deal of issues, which, to be honest, are actually the fault of the designers and not merely from time constraints. Among the worst of these being meta progression, microtransactions, and their lack of balance. The atrocity of microtransactions, the great crime against gamers, can be determined as the culprit here, by the 1,000 tiny cuts inflicted into this work, and by such an identifiable blade. Much of the levels are filler, the open world has no purpose, the modal mission types are only present in the second act, the AI difficulty was turned way down from ground zeros, the adaptive difficulty is unable to accommodate your approaches as a player, the stupid chopper introductions and unbalanced landing zones, the poorly balanced buddy system, the pointless customization, the mostly worthless vehicle deployments, the lack of mission identity, no extra ops, the utterly broken high-level gear, the bloated outfit list. All of these are just terrible marks on this corpse, which make it almost unsalvageable. However, the core gameplay, the positioning, stealth, and action elements, wherein the mission structure properly incentivizes their employee, actually do link together with a more subtle elegance than perhaps even Ground Zeroes. Scoring of the Phantom Pain emphasizes speed, but the error is that this speed is a velocity tarnished with a lack of definition, because it rewards both stealth and action in equal measure, or perhaps in unequal measure, but never rewards their identifiable intricacies uniquely. In combination with the lack of identity in mission goals, performance within the game is certainly according to implementation of core gameplay, but nonetheless lacks a higher identity. All these come out to a final rating in terms of net merit, a final score where we account for all the deficiencies and accomplishments of the creative work in question on a scale of 0 to 10, where a 0 is worthless garbage to be actively avoided, and a 10 is a perfect piece of art which must be understood, of 3.75 out of 10.